Hi guys, welcome back to the Collector Series on WTCtv. But today we're WTC without the TV. Tony's off in California with Kurt Angle, so he's sidelined for this one. So it's just WTC, no TV. But that gives me the opportunity to do something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that's an all-Canadian show of wrestling card collectors, because we're out there and we turn up here and there, but this is the first time that I can gather three guys and we can talk about the uniquely Canadian perspective of wrestling cards. So with me today, I have Alex Silva from Toronto. I have Big Pat Ryan from Windsor. And I have Mr. David Wright from Brantford, Ontario. Now, the format of this show, guys, is we're going to talk about wrestling in general up here in Canada and what the experience has been. Then we're going to get into the collecting aspect of it, how you guys got into wrestling trading cards and what you guys are into specifically with your collections. Then I'd like to talk a little more about sort of our experience being collectors in Canada and some of the unique issues we face versus what the American guys to the south do. And then lastly, we'll just have a bit of fun telling a few sort of stories from around the hobby. So wrestling in Canada. We have a very rich heritage of wrestling in Canada. The four of us are from Ontario, but as I was saying before we started, there's going to be collectors and of this stuff from Victoria, BC, all the way to probably St. John's, Newfoundland. Canada has had some great moments in the wrestling business. When you talk about the west side of Canada, obviously Calgary Stampede Wrestling and the Stu Harts come to mind. In Ontario in the past, things were run by the Tunnies in the 60s and 70s. Vince took over, I think it was around 84, and then it's been WWE predominant, WWF, WWE predominantly, although we do have AEW now. The original Chic run, Alex, you're probably a little bit too young, but
Yeah.
David, you might remember in the late 70s, there was a run in Toronto with a guy called the Chic that sold out the Maple Leaf Gardens without fail every Sunday night for about a 3.5-year period. In Montreal, we had International Grand Prix and the Rougeau brothers, and this is Jacques Rougeau, Johnny Rougeau, the father of Jacques and Raymond, who ran the territory for a long time. And still on the East Coast, independent wrestling has always been strong. It's huge in Southern Ontario, and it's growing even across the country. So I just want to throw out, I'll do a bit of talking now about some of the great moments in Canadian wrestling history, then I'll turn it over to you guys, and you guys will share some of your favorites. Some of the big thing, I just made a few notes of, I've been a wrestling fan up here since I was a kid, so I've seen it all. And I figured, what are some of the things that sort of, as a Canadian fan, make me feel proudest and things I remember most? And one of the earliest ones was Harley Race beating Terry Funk in 1977 to win the NWA championship. David, you're nodding because you remember. He won the NWA title, and he won it with an Indian deathlock, and he had Terry Funk in the thing for about 5 minutes, and I was 7 or 8 years old at the time. So for me, it was like, when it was in between that sort of area of is it real or isn't, it only made sense that the guy that looked like Harley Race would be able to kill anybody with a hold like that. And he did, and he won the title. I don't know if you guys remember the big event at the CNE in 1986, Orndorff versus
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hogan. That was one of the big Coliseum videos, and it was the start of the Hulkamania era where we had 70,000 almost at the old CNE grandstand.
Yeah. The X. Yeah.
Obviously, the two WrestleManias, the Ultimate Warrior at 6, pinning Hulk Hogan, is probably one of the greatest moments I think that's ever happened up here in Canada, as well as Rock and Hogan all those years later at 2022 for WrestleMania 18. And Alex, you'll know this. Funny thing now is that the Maple Leaf Gardens isn't around anymore. It's actually a Loblaws, which is a grocery store, but they note where the center ice of the Maple Leaf Gardens used to be. So I presume that would have been close to where the ring was. So I have pictures of me holding a box of cookies in a supermarket aisle saying, this is where Harley beat Terry. And some other moments, and I'll turn it over to you guys. Lita versus Trish Stratus at Unforgiven 2006 was the main event, which was a very big moment for the females up in Canada. Of course, Randy Orton won his first title, youngest ever, by beating Chris Benoit, another Canadian who, controversially at the end, but that was SummerSlam 2004, and we've had another SummerSlam since. And of course, there's a long list of famous Canadian wrestlers, probably starting with the Hart family. Bret Hart would be our number one guy more than likely, and then of course his brother Rowan and Natalia and everyone that came from that family. Edge and Christian, Trish Stratus, Canada's greatest athlete, Iron Mike Sharp, guys like Johnny Canine, and on it goes. So we Canadians have something to be proud of, and then we're going to talk about wrestling cards. So I want to turn it over to you guys now, and you guys talk about wrestling in general. Let's start with you, Pat, because you actually were a wrestler.
Yeah, and what date is this airing?
This is going to air probably in a couple weeks' time.
Okay, so they're going to miss what's probably the greatest event in Border City wrestling history.
Okay.
Coming up Saturday, October 7th. So they'll have already gone by. It's the 30th anniversary of Border City Wrestling.
Oh, congratulations
to
them.
I get all emotional because it's amazing. Border City is where I started, where I trained at the Can-Am Dojo, trained with Rhino. But this show that everybody's going to miss, if you guys get a chance to come down on October 7th from your area, come down. Kurt Angle's there, actually signing autographs. You got Sabin and Shelley, the Motor City Machine Guns. You got Miguel and Wentz, the Rascals are going to be there. Japanese sensation Kato Kiyoma, former champions such as D'Lo, Dreamer, Johnny Swinger, Cody Deaner, Scott D'Amore, Santino's going to be there. A lot of the Impact crew, and there'll be some surprises. It's going to be phenomenal. And
Wow.
You talk big moments in history in Canada. The only independent match The Rock ever wrestled was here.
Really?
Against it was The Rock and D'Lo against Scott D'Amore and Larry Destiny in 1997. It was supposed to be Scott against Rock for the Intercontinental Championship, but Vince didn't want it to happen because The Rock could get injured. I can't remember the entire story, so they put D'Lo in the mix. The Rock wasn't even supposed to really do it, but he got in the ring anyway. So pretty amazing history in this city, as well as a friend of mine is writing a book called The History of Pro Wrestling in Windsor, Ontario, going all the way back to the beginning and like the Detroit connection and beyond in the 1920s and 30s. It's amazing. So
what's your connection to Border City? Are you
right now I'm just an alumni. I trained at the Can-Am Dojo at the very beginning with Rhino. Was one of the guys I started with. I was in the ring with the Canadian Destroyer, the guy that the name was match is named after, and this is always his anniversary show because he passed away 30 years ago, just a week ago. So a couple weeks ago, trying to get dates right where we're doing this. So I'm just always a huge fan, always been part. I'm always there. I've done the music. I've done, you know what I mean? I got back in the ring like about 10 years ago when I got in shape for a while, but then I got back out of shape again. I'm 50. There's guys in the ring older than me, but I just go now. I'll be front row for this show with two Border City Wrestling Hall of Famers, and just being part of it. I'm super excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. David, you and I had a chance to meet each other a few weeks back at the main event. And we discovered that you were from Brantford, that we discovered that we knew someone we had a friend in common. Tell us about your experience growing up. You're closer in age to me. So talk about your love of wrestling and the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. So my love with wrestling, it started in grade school. All my friends, everybody, we watched it. It was on Saturday afternoons from 12 till 2. We got from
CHCH.
We got the CHCH at 1:00, but at noon we got the WWF, all their tape shows from out of Rochester. So it was channel 29 from Buffalo. So that came across on our cable. And then in 1985, it exploded because we got TSN. So TSN brought in wrestling from the West. So it brought in AWA, it brought in Stampede Wrestling. So, you had that little circle of the Northeast WWF wrestling. And then, of course, we had all the after mags that you could read about. But once again, you just read about these guys. You never saw them unless you were a tape trader or you got into it But we would always talk WWF. So I became a big fan. And WWF taped their Maple Leaf Wrestling weekly shows in Brantford.
That's right.
So once I discovered that, I was a dedicated ringside rat for 22 shows consecutively, so almost 2 years. I got to know the security staff, so I ended up helping set up the ring. We used to wait outside for the wrestlers to show up to get autographs. I had a ton of which, I'm sad now I've lost. But I had everybody from Luscious Johnny Valiant, Classy Freddie Blassie, everybody that came in the side blue doors in their rental cars. We got to answer.
Now, was that the time of Lord Atherlayton on commentary? Norm Kimber was the ring announcer.
Norm Kimber was the ring announcer, but it was Jack. I can't remember his last name. Jack. Yeah, and Jesse the Body.
Right.
And so it was Jack and Jesse, and then Jack got sick, and so it became Gorilla and Jesse.
Right.
So we had Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse, and that's where, if anybody ever watched the old Body Shop that Jesse Ventura used to do, it was filmed in the left corner of the Civic Center. So you could tell when they were doing it, because the TV lights would come on in the corner, so everyone would rush from ringside, and it was literally lunch tables that were blocking you from going on to the set. And so we would watch, they would have Randy Savage, they would have everybody. But the TV tapings were great. It was my first time seeing my first main event. My first dark match was Andre the Giant and Jimmy Snuka versus Ken Patera and Cowboy Bob Orton. And I remember standing on one of the chairs as Andre came down the aisle. I got to pat Andre on the back, and my head was at his shoulder when I was standing on a chair. So, and the man was giant, but
I was at the Maple Leaf Gardens where they crushed his sternum, where Bundy and Studd on the ramp, and I was right there, maybe 10 feet away, and I saw that at close, and he was just a giant of the man. And before we go to Alex, I just want to mention, you talked about the old shows we used to watch, and Pat, you talked about the Detroit connection. Do you guys remember the George Cannon show with Milt Ruskin?
You got a great George Cannon story.
Yeah, what was it called? It was Superstar. I can't remember.
Superstars of Wrestling.
Yeah, I love that show. It was very homey, and very low rent. But that's one of my earliest memories of sort of, and it was. I guess that would have been considered independent, right?
Yeah, there'll be some George Cannon stories in that book I was talking about. Because he was Windsor, Ontario guy, right? So hilarious, man. That guy was great. Awesome stories.
Alex, let's get to you. First of all, congratulations on the birth of your son. That's number 2.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Alex, you're a little younger than us. Why don't you talk to us about your experience being a wrestling fan up here in Toronto?
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of you guys. You're naming some legends like Andre. Obviously, I was only born in November of '91, so I missed all the good stuff of the '80s, and but yeah, I think my first show I ever went to, I was maybe around like 8 or 9. And there's a local community center called McCormick Recreation Center in Toronto on the West End. And it's a rec center we used to go to as a kid all the time. We would hang out there after school. And so one day I saw like posters on the wall, and they're like, oh, there's going to be a wrestling show. I'm like, oh, I watch, WWF on TV. So I was pretty pumped. And then, so they came in, and since we were always there, they let us go in the ring. They let us go in the back. They let us just, wherever we wanted. Pat mentioned Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore actually wrestled on that card. It must have been like 98, maybe around that time. I actually funny, I tweeted him a couple years later, or like more recently, and I asked him, hey, do you have any memories of that card? Because I have like some signed photos, signed shirts. I have pictures with Ricky Johnson, The Rock's uncle, who was there. And I tweeted Scott D'Amore. I'm like, do you have any memories of the show? Because I would love to like just get the date and just have who else was on the card. And he tweeted me back and he said, yeah, I remember that show. I almost died. And I was like, what? And then I tweeted him back. He never replied. So I have no clue the backstory of what happened that day. But yeah, that's the first show that I ever went to as a kid. I was so happy. And then only after that, in 2003, I went to a house show. I know this is like way later than you guys, but 2003, I went to a house show main evented by Kane and Shane McMahon on my birthday, November 7th, 2003, I believe. And then, the following summer, I went to SummerSlam, where Benoit lost to Randy Orton.
Right.
I had seats right up top. Probably I could touch the ceiling. And I've been going to shows ever since. I love going. I know, Pat, you love indie wrestling, and I'm sure we all do. Obviously, I know, Paul, you go to Greektown and all that stuff. But I've been going to indie shows for the last probably around 10 years, and I like taking photos, like getting front row seats, taking some nice pictures with my DSLR, and I post them. I have a wrestling photo Instagram and Twitter, Wrestling in Shadows, if you guys want to follow it. And I just take like some decent photos. There's a lot of indie talent who don't have a lot of photos out there, so I like taking them, posting them, and then it's not too popular, but at least they can reshare it or repost it or whatever, do whatever they want. Sell 8x10s with a couple of guys that reached out to me. So try to help out, and it's just a hobby. I don't do it for money or anything. Just for fun. I like going to indie shows. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at now. And then I collect cards, obviously. So
A lot of us tied into the indie world, not just up here in Canada. I follow because of the cards mostly. I get introduced to all these indie feds all across North America. We buy their cards, and the next thing you know, I'm meeting guys that are wrestlers and promoters and stuff. So it's cool. Before we start talking, I mean, we're four wrestling fans, but what brings us together is that we're four of the higher wrestling card collectors that are out there. I just want to ask David specifically, maybe you too as well, Pat. Did you ever have a chance to see the Sheik back in the late 70s? Because I did a few times. That was right when I got introduced. And
Yeah, no,
that that that
I
that
never did have the chance.
yeah, you would have been like you'd have to be over 50, I think, to have made it. Um, I don't ever remember a heel. We talk about Dominic Mysterio today. That's what it was like
Sure,
with the Sheik back in the day. And remember, there weren't as many kids back then. It was an older, more mature crowd. There was a lot of older
for
people.
sure.
The old sort of idea of the old ladies with the umbrellas and the purses. That was very much a thing, and they were loud. And my dad, who was East Indian, his buddies went to wrestling, and they brought me once, kicking and screaming, because I just want to go along, and I got to see the Sheik, and that was it. Once I saw that, it was 50 years later. Um,
For sure,
but
yeah.
that's what ties me to it, is those early memories. Is that I was fortunate that as a kid, like you said, Alex, I got exposed to it, and it just took. And for some people, certain things come and go in their lives, but for me, and I'm sure as you said, Pat, wrestling's always been there, and that's often the case with a lot of these collectors that we talk to. That even though they might collect other things, the ones that collect wrestling heavy have been tied to wrestling for a long time. So let's get into that now, specifically wrestling trading cards, which is what the show is about. Um, let's go to you, Pat, again, and let's talk about how you got into specifically wrestling collectibles and trading cards.
Well, I collected cards as a kid, but then I stopped. In the 90s, my buddy and I collected wrestling figures. We used to cross the border into Detroit and hit the 9 Toys R Us, and we would buy everything that we could. So I still have an amazing collection of 90s mint on card figures, probably like everybody does my age. um, but to get back into wrestling cards, it was 2018. I was on Kijiji, a marketplace site that you can get online, and I saw somebody locally post the 1998 Comic Images The Rock autograph card for 125 bucks.
oh man,
So I messaged them and talked him down to 100, because you always get a bargain. And I picked it up, and that's what reignited it. Had no idea that card would become what it is, but so that's what got me going. And then COVID hit, and what else do you got to do during COVID? Like everybody did, right? So I've pulled some amazing stuff. I've built a pretty cool collection. Still have some of my original stuff, but that's about it. I'm loving all the
Is
new
it
stuff.
is it mostly modern, Pat, or do you get into any of the vintage or older cards as well?
You know what? I had a box of 1954 Parkhurst, 54, 55 Parkhurst that I sold to Rocket Sports Cards in Chatham, because he deals with more vintage and stuff. And I'm like, I had him for a while. I got him for a good price. I gave him to what I was happy with, so I could put more money back in, like we always do, right? But I do have vintage stuff for sure. Nothing. I don't have many wrestling all stars. But I'm a set collector like you, Paul. I
Yeah,
like to have full sets, so which is tough in this day and age.
very.
Yeah.
How about you, David? You buy more product, and you're a guy that
Um,
you're a guy. I mean, I'm going to quote you. You said that you don't fuck around. If you want something, you get it. You don't like to nickel and dime. Tell us about your collection.
yeah, so I've my main focus has always been, since I was a kid, I've collected baseball cards,
Okay.
collected tops, collected Blue Jays, collected baseball, and in that time, wrestling was sort of was my off season. So when baseball finished, it was like I wasn't really that big of a hockey card fan. I would do the O-Pee-Chee sets, I would buy the O-Pee-Chee packs, but I needed something to keep me going in the off season, so I would collect the wrestling cards. And the original boom in 83, 84, 85, 86 resulted in wrestling cards becoming a little more available. So you had the 85 Tops Wrestling All Stars, which is like one of the classic sets in wrestling. So I had packs of that, and we had friends that traded, and so we would just buy 2 or 3 packs here, and then you know, you would have matches with your cards, or you would slowly build up the set. And every off season in baseball, I would always see, okay, what's out? So I would go look at the card shops. Classic wrestling was out, so I bought the classic wrestling cards. And then, you know, as it progressed, it wasn't until probably 2009 when I took about a 10-year break from the hobby, from about 98 to about 2008, just because I was just exhausted with the hobby at that point. Everything was just so much. And so I kind of backed off from serious collecting, but it was still there. You would still see a pack here, buy a pack there, and just to kind of keep up what's going on. But about 2009, when I got seriously back into collecting, that's when I had seen there were more regular top sets now. The Topps design started emulating baseball, which I thought was really cool. And I liked the ease of putting together a wrestling set. You know, you could buy a box, 100 cards, set's done, chase your inserts, get whatever else you need, you're done.
Right.
Then in about 2000, well, the start of COVID, really. So 18, 19, somewhere around there. I really started getting into the PC, the personal collection aspect of it. I stopped really just doing sets and then calling it quits and then waiting till the springtime for baseball. Then I was like, okay, set's done. Now what else do I want to do? So I started following more people that did PCs, seeing what, you know, rainbow collecting was all about. And I thought, well, if I'm going to get into this, I'm not going to, you know, I've never been one to go to a show and nickel and dime a guy and lose a card out because I'm not willing to wiggle $5. And so it got to the point where, like, you know, I stopped, as I explained to somebody at the National, we were having this discussion, I stopped being embarrassed about being able to afford cards I wanted. And so it became like, you know what, I want that card. It's out of 10. I know I'm only going to see 3 or 4 of them. So I'm not going to lose that card over $50. And I don't really care because I keep everything. I don't flip. I don't look to make money out of my cards. So when I see something I want, I buy it. Some people, you know, oh, you overpaid for that. I'm like, not really, because it's in my collection.
And it's staying there.
Yeah, and it's staying there, and I'm happy to have it. So if I can get something that, you know, I've bought a few one-of-ones, but if I can get something that no one else has, great. As long as I don't think I'm overpaying, I really don't care what anyone else thinks I'm overpaying. But as long as I feel comfortable with the purchase, I'm good with it. But it's been a different mindset since I've gone into the PC side of things and really started building rainbows, building collections, especially when it comes to stuff like, being from Canada, when it comes to stuff like Bret Hart. I was floored by the, you know, how actually difficult it is to find some of the Bret Hart stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's the thing. People think just because you want to find a Bret, it's going to be out there. Now, when we met at the National, we were giving out a lot of Panini product, and you bought some of that stuff as well. We've talked about the Immaculates and stuff. So, you know, you cover a wide spectrum. But I get the sense you're very much like me. You're a collector. You get it and you keep it. And Tony is always very outspoken about the matter of don't tell me what to pay for something. It's my money, and if I
For sure.
want it, it goes in my collection. Now, speaking of spending big money on a card, Alex, you know where this is going.
Yeah.
Alex has one card in particular that I'm very fond of. But I'll let you do the talking, Alex. Tell us about your
Yeah.
experience as a wrestling card collector.
I'll give you a little background, then I guess we'll go into that. So as a kid, you know, I'm obviously younger than you guys, but I always collected Pokemon, because obviously late 90s kid. Growing up in the late 90s, everyone collected Pokemon. That and hockey, because obviously I'm from Toronto, so I always collected Leafs. Joe Sakic, who, if you know my username everywhere, it's a very bad username, but I made it when I was a kid. So yeah, I collected those things primarily, and then, but I always watched wrestling. Like I mentioned, me and my sister would always, you know, we'd stay up late, dim the TV because it was past our bedtime, 9 o'clock, to watch Raw. and then put it on mute, or like 1 or 2 volumes so my parents don't wake up. So we always watched wrestling, but I never collected wrestling, which I guess I don't know, I never really put together. And then I think around 2011, I was on a forum called Sports Card Forum. I know, very generic. I think that's what it's called. I don't use it anymore, but I would always go to the wrestling section. I would like do my hockey stuff, then I go to the wrestling section. I would see people posting the 98, 99 WCW autographs. So I'm like, man, these are cool. Like, I know a lot of people don't like the design of them because they're kind of bland. But I saw the names, right? I'm like, Eddie Guerrero autograph. Ooh, like Chris Benoit, obviously we all know about him. But I'm like, it's kind of like an interesting card to have. Obviously he's never gonna sign again. And then you just see all the big names, right? Like Hogan, Macho Man, Liz. I'm like, man, I gotta start getting some of these. So the first one I bought was in 2011. I got. I always thought I had Scott Steiner first, but I went back through old email. I keep all my emails. I bought Kurt Hennig. He was my first one I ever bought in 2011. Second one I bought was Scott Steiner, and then it just snowballed from there. I always wanted to get the bigger names, so I got right after it was Eddie. I got Macho and Liz back to back, and then I think I got like Norman Smiley randomly around that time. And I just, over the years, I would just, if I see one on eBay for cheap, I'll buy it. All the big names, right? And then 2015, I bought a case of Topps Undisputed, which I know is a very popular set. And then that's what kind of got me into more of the modern cards, because I bought it like right when it came out. And since then I just been chasing those sets, and just I completed the WCW set, the pack pulled. Obviously I don't have the Flair and some other guys. But yeah,
But you
and
do have
nowadays
one.
I do have one, which I guess I'll talk about. But I just kind of like you guys. I just, whatever I like, I see, I buy it, right? Like if I can afford it, I'll buy it. I'm on a little bit of a budget now, so I can't afford too much. But yeah, a lot of the stuff I do buy some stuff if it's really cheap. I'll flip it, but I'm flipping it to put money back into the hobby to buy stuff that I want. It's not like, I guess there's no, even if I wasn't doing that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I just want,
You collect how you collect, right?
right? So I'm not afraid to buy some stuff to resell. But yeah, all the stuff 90% of the stuff I buy is, I want it, I buy it, it comes into my collection, I scan it, store it, and I can look at it online, I can look at it in person. I just love having the cards, right? And then the one that you're talking about is the British Bulldog WCW autograph. I did obtain it. What was it, like 2 years ago, I think? Dave Peck posted online. He's like, "Hey, look what Charles Robinson has." Referee Charles Robinson. It was a picture of the Bulldog, and I said, "Man, that's a nice card. I would love to have that." And
We
then
all
I
said that.
right there was like a
Yeah.
tons of comments, right? And I thought about it, and I was like, "Man, I really want that card." So I ended up I messaged Charles Robinson. So Dave Peck did actually like mention the card on Twitter, but I went myself and I went on Instagram, messaged Charles Robinson myself. I bought some cards off him, not Bulldog related. It was like the Hogan. He had a bunch of guys, right? He had like probably 30 of them. I bought, I think, 10 WWE autographs. Me and the deal went smooth, and then I was like, "What do you want for the Bulldog?" And so went back and forth for a while. It went like a month. There was someone in Australia that wanted it, and I just, I offered a little bit more, and he was more comfortable shipping it to me in the States because I have a mailbox there, or in Canada, as opposed to shipping off to Australia. So yeah, I purchased. I've only seen. I don't know about you, Paul, but I've seen 3 Bulldog autographs. I have pictures of 3.
I've seen yours in person, and I've seen another one online twice, but I think it was the same one that I saw twice. But congratulations to you on that, because
Thank
you're
you.
not the only one. I really wanted that card as well, and I spoke to Charles, and I subsequently got the Mongo card from him. But you really, really wanted it, and
Yeah,
and
but
you paid the price on it,
I
and good
did.
on you, man. Because looking back at that now, you didn't overpay for it. Based on now, coming out soon, might even be as early as tomorrow. Tony and I did an episode with Jamie Wallace and Frank from Australia, And he had, whilst we were talking in this fashion, he had his Booker T and his hardcore hack just on his table around. So, guys, here it is, the collector series. We give it to you. We give you the guy that has the British Bulldog, the hardest cards to find. Frank has. So,
One note on the Bulldog though. So I know I paid a lot of money. I don't have that kind of money. Just letting people know.
Yeah, no, you're not Joey Graven, but I
No.
get it.
So I actually, some of us have wives, and I don't really tell her what I spend on cards. I spend a couple hundred here, and it adds up to a couple thousand, whatever. But I don't really tell her the specifics. But with that card specifically, I told her, I'm like, hey, this is a big number, but here's my plan. So I said, I'm gonna get this card, but I'm only paying for it using money that from cards that I sell. So I went on a huge selling spree. I think it was summer 2021 or 2022, whatever it was. And I sold a bunch of stuff from my personal collection in order to fund that purchase. So to me, it's like, it sounds really dumb, but the card was free to me because I sold stuff to pay for it, right? So that's why, like, I know David said, um, if you buy something, he more often than not, he just keeps it, right? But in that sense, I wanted all the stuff that I did love. I saw this Bulldog. I'm like, I can't pass up this opportunity. So I sold some stuff, and now honestly, thinking back, I can't even remember one card from all. I probably sold like a couple hundred cards. I can't remember one card that I missed, like
Yeah, and
comparison to the Bulldog.
and you got a story. You got, there's guys like me and Wallace and that have 107 of the 111. I don't have a Bulldog, and you do. So I was the happiest guy in the world when I found out that the card had landed with you in Toronto. I thought, oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
So, guys, the next thing I want to get onto, and I want to get into the meat of the discussion of being a Canadian in North America, especially as a collector, because we have some unique sort of stories or situations. And I'll start us off, and then I'll like you each to chime in on what your sort of collecting experience has been, sort of being north of the border. But for me, being a guy that buys a lot of stuff, buys most of the major sets, if not all of them, 2015 or 2016 was a watershed moment for me because all of a sudden eBay introduced the global shipping program. And that completely changed everything for me as a collector in Canada. And what was happening was a lot of the American sellers, and the reality is that 98%, whatever it is, of the card shops and of the guys that break are in the States. There was problems of sometimes with the Canadian border, sometimes getting stuff up here. I was hearing stories. Now, I didn't have a lot of them. I was getting 99% of the cards I was buying, but I was hearing that some of the American sellers were having a tough time getting stuff across the board to us. And I think the eBay response was a program that would protect these guys down in the States, where it would be a very thorough vetting process to make sure the cards go through what they got to get through to get up here. But the problem is that the shipping increased dramatically. I'm talking 5x. So now all of a sudden you're talking to a guy that might buy one or two relic cards at a time, but I couldn't anymore because the shipping was $9, $10, $12 on these things. So that greatly changed the way I had to start collecting and that curtailed me buying pretty much any more high-end stuff. I was buying sets and I was buying a lot of autographs, a lot of relics, a lot of face paints or whatever I could get my hands on. But that made it very prohibitive. Now, nowadays I buy through my buddy Chuckster in the States and he ships it up to me in one go. But that for me was sort of a watershed moment where being a guy in Canada trying to get this stuff sucks. What do you guys say to that? Let's start with you, David. What's your experience been being up here?
No, I had the same thing when the international shipping program came in. My purchases dropped like 90%.
Sure, a lot of us.
And all it did really was, much like yourself, it just forced me to find a better way. So, and in that sense, I kind of appreciated the shipping program because it allowed me to interact with more of my American friends. And so now it was like, okay, there's this card I want. There's a $20 card I want. I'm not paying another $17 to have it shipped up to me. Right. So it's like, hey, can you, Collector X, can you broker this for me? Can I get the guy to ship it to you? And then you can either ship it to me, or the next time we go to the National, we meet up and we swap stuff. And that's what it's become. So my first day of the National is really trading boxes with people of, here's stuff for you, here's stuff for me. And it made me become a more creative thinker when it came to collecting. But in the end, I'm sure it also made me a little more seasoned buyer, because now there's not necessarily things that I would have purchased before at $2 shipping. Now I'm not buying that card. So it's allowing to me to be a more discerning collector. I'm not really grabbing everything now, because that's still, collecting for 45 years now. It's still that part of, you really have to balance collecting between possessing and hoarding. And, like, it's just, you want everything. Of course, we want everything, but you really got to train yourself to be, okay, what you really got to focus. And it's like, okay, what do I want? And I think with, once again, with PC collecting, that's really helped my focus, and it's really changed the way I collect. But the international shipping, when it first happened, there was probably an 8-month period where I bought maybe 2 cards on eBay before I found a separate way.
I was paralyzed. It was like, I can't justify making these purchases anymore. I'm out to hobby.
Absolutely.
Of course, I wasn't, but
Absolutely.
and now I do it the way you did it, but I only started doing it recently since Panini, because Panini has made it very, very difficult. Like, for example, I'm 6 cards away from the Immaculate base set. I think we talked about this once.
Yep.
And that's a bear of a collection to put together, just because of how few cards came in each box. And if
Sure.
I didn't have Chuck,
I'm more than 6 away, but
but
6 is nice.
Like, there's no
Yeah.
way a guy in Toronto could collect that and have them shipped up here one at a time. It's just impossible,
No.
Whereas I get them sent to Chuck in Maryland, and I'm paying that $3 charge instead of that $15 charge.
sure.
Just imagine having to spend 15 times 100 just in shipping, and
For
then
sure.
Pat, what about you? Have you ever had any of these problems?
I'm blessed. I live in South Detroit. Windsor
Oh,
is south of Detroit. So, I mean, I can
right.
see
You're right
when I
there.
get out to the main road from where I'm at, I can see the bridge. I cross the tunnel in 4 minutes. And I've always had buddies in the wrestling business. So I have
Right.
people that
Sure.
I've been able to ship to. And then I do card shows over here. So the Canadian guys in my area that don't
I
get
see.
the cards, I buy from the States, and I buy multiples. I like buying as many as I can, because combined shipping is my favorite thing. Alex, I've bought from you before. Joe Sakic 19. As soon as
Yes,
you started
sir.
saying that, I've bought from you many times. So I like to combine things. I've been lucky being here. I'm pretty blessed. It hasn't hit me. In the last little while, I've tried to slow down on buying from the States, because it's easy, because it's cheap when you buy a whole bunch of stuff, and you can do like David said. You're just like, oh, look, click, 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 click. But I've been buying a lot more Canadian stuff lately, just to kind of slow my roll. Black and Brave, I'm a Seth is my PC, and Natalia as well. So I've been trying to keep to that, but I love autographs and relic cards. So, but yeah, I'm lucky. Not the total Canadian sad story that you guys have to deal with all the time.
Well, that's just one of them. Is there anything else that comes to mind with any one of you guys? Alex, you're up next. Like, that you think that we might be disadvantaged, or our experience isn't the same as guys in other parts of the world?
The main thing for me would be the exchange rate.
Right.
The
That's another thing. Sure.
like I just bought, I just said I'm on a budget, but I just bought a car that was like $1,000. I mean, I haven't spent anything the last couple of weeks, so I made a big purchase. But after exchange, that's 1,400 Canadian. It's like, right? So there's been a lot of purchases that I've held back on because of the exchange rate, and or the shipping's not a huge thing for me, because I have a mailbox in the States, so I use Ship My Cards, which is like
Service.
a mailbox service. There's a bunch of them, right? So
They
you
were
stuff,
set up for people like us, right? In
yeah.
this situation, like Pat was mentioning, where he has the advantage, but for people that don't, that's what Ship My Cards and these kinds of things. A smart guy figured, you know what? There's a lot of Canadians that could use a service like this.
You still have to pay fees, obviously, but once you add it up, and like say you buy $100, or let's say $200 card from the States, and you get it shipped to your home, then you're paying the exchange rate. Obviously, you do regardless, but you pay the shipping to Canada, which obviously I don't know how much that would be now, and then the import charges, right? So I get shipped to Ship My Cards, and they have 2 locations, Arizona and Oregon. So if I get it shipped to Oregon, it's tax free. So if it's a big purchase, you're saving some heavy dough on taxes, right? Like I've
But
actually,
these are all things we have to do that guys
yeah,
that were south of us never have to think about.
yeah, they just buy it, and then it's in their
And that's
home,
the
right?
Yeah.
They don't have to pay the import charge and all that stuff. I've bought cards. I remember specifically one card I bought in Quebec, and because it was pretty expensive, the taxes would have been like 50-60 bucks to my home, because obviously even if you buy it in Canada, you still got to pay the taxes, right? I got it shipped to Oregon. The shipping cost was about the same, but I probably saved like 50 bucks in taxes.
Right.
So
The imports.
yeah, sorry, the imports and
You guys, I'll throw this out to all of you guys, because you mentioned an important point, the exchange. I always think in American dollars. I
Me
always have
too.
since the dollar. I don't do that change. I never torture myself by thinking, what is this in real money? You know,
Yeah.
I've always been like my spreadsheets, everything I do for Price Guide is always American. So when I spend, it's American dollars. And the only times that last screen on PayPal where it says, here's what it is in Canadian, here's what's actually coming off your credit card. And I see, oh, that 35 was actually 52. You know, but I've trained myself to just think in American dollars. So when I say my collection is worth X or whatever, it's American. And I've done that to save myself that grief of that difference, you know?
You just
I
click
understand.
that last screen, you just click it off as fast as you can.
Yeah, not look at the real cost.
Yeah.
So I thought you were saying?
I understand that grief because like I said, I buy in America and then I sell to Canadians. So I got to do
Right.
conversions all the time. I'm like, oh God, this sucks, and you price everything. But then I did a card show in Chatham, Ontario, a couple months ago now, and I also get to drive the WWE, the legends that do autograph signings. So I had Cowboy Bob Orton and Victoria with me back and forth to Detroit. So I had my buddy bring my cards to the show, and then he brought them to his house. Great stories about Orton and Victoria, fantastic day. But I left my cards at my buddy's house, picked them up the next day, brought them home at night. I was tired, left some in my vehicle. Didn't realize that my door lock on my driver's side was broken. The accentuator or whatever you call it to pop it. Somebody stole about 10 grand worth of cards.
Oh Jesus, I'm sorry to hear that.
Had to deal with insurance. If you don't have your cards insured, it's household contents, maximum of $2,500 for your collection unless you have it listed properly. I'm sure you guys all have big collections, so you have them listed properly. I'm starting to work finally doing it because
Even that, I used to carry a lot more insurance on my cards, but that's
Yeah.
gone up a lot. So I don't have an adequate policy. Like for example, if my house burned down,
Yeah.
I get a check, but my cards are worth 5, 6,
Yeah,
7
correct.
times that. And I used
Oh,
to
yeah.
I used to carry more insurance, but it was getting to be like $500 a year. Like it was getting up there, you know, for something that, you know, I don't grade. I'm more, I love wrestling. I love looking at them, but I don't worry about the value as much, or maybe as I should. But, and that's another thing too, grading, because it's difficult for us being up here. Now, I should mention, if you don't know, the three of you guys, that PSA is opening up. I heard in Halifax, an outlet there, and they're going to start doing on-site grading at Sport Expo in Toronto. So that's going to, be good for us. We're going to have the opportunity, like, you know, when I go down to the national, I see these guys running to PSA to get their thing in as early as possible. I've never done grading for that reason, having to ship it down to the States. What's been your experience on that? Go ahead, David.
I personally, I don't subscribe to grading. I know I'm friends with several people that do, that live and die by grading, and we've had discussions on it. I understand grading. I get it. For my tastes, grading would be for preservation and for authentication. I'm not so into the number side of it. I find that to be a little bit sketchy, and I've heard personal horrors. I've heard personal horror stories of what's happened. I've played with it. I've resubbed. I've done all that stuff, so I know how it can be manipulated. But that said, I do appreciate the people that's what they collect. I don't shun grading. I've bought graded cards. I've bought specific cards because they're graded 10s. I've bought them for different reasons, but myself, I've submitted, I think historically I've submitted 5 cards to ever be graded, but once again, they were more for protection than the actual number. I didn't really care about the actual number. I wanted to protect the card. It was the Jeter SP, because
Right.
I that was from a hand collated set I made from buying packs. But when it got to be the point, when he got to be a Hall of Famer, when it got to be a key card, I wanted to protect it because that foil set is so, so easy to damage.
Yeah.
So that became protection. My the Trout Diamond I have, that became for protection. So I will slab a lot of cards for protection. I had some of my T206 done for authentication, but also to keep it in, just to keep it in the slab. But I don't regularly subscribe to the grading model or to collecting grades. I will buy them, like I said, and the difference between a 10 and a 9, when you buy fine 9s as opposed to a 10, I will do that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't really care about a gem grade, but the drop off to a 9, it's a win for collectors, right? So I will absolutely pay that price of a card, because I know it's authenticated. I know it's been checked over. I don't really care it's a 9 because I'm going to crack it anyway. But the price of it is astronomically lower from a 10, so I'll gladly grab it. Once again, being going back to the point of, if it's something I need, if it's something I want, if it goes in my Bliss PC and it's graded, I have to get it because I don't know when I'm going to see it next.
Right. How about you, Pat? Again, you being close, you being so close to the border, you probably that saves you from that again.
No, I've submitted stuff to KSA. I mean, KSA gets a whatever the rap is. The guys have been around for almost 30 years.
Yeah,
But I did it mostly for protection because I had that rock card. I've collected the entire 1998 set of those autographs. The only one I don't have I've got most of them encased for protection. My Owen Hart isn't. It's the eBay authenticity it came in, so I've left it alone like that.
That's the only one I don't have of that set.
Yeah, well, it was not a cheap one, but I got it for a really good price. And the only thing I'm missing is the redemption card. I'm not paying $600 for a redemption card. I don't care what anybody. Ridiculous. But then I buy on eBay a lot of PSA stuff because I do shows and people like to see the graded stuff. So I'll see people that have Wonderama stuff graded, and I've picked it up for $2 and $3 a card, and it's graded by PSA. Like, how the hell can they sell it so cheaply? So I buy it, put it on my table. It looks good. My collection is organic because I only have certain cards and certain things that will never leave that I'm married to, but the rest of it, whatever. Who cares? It's cool. I've had it for a while. I got the chance to acquire this card. I pulled the Cody Rhodes Gold ringside in 2022 Select. I sold it to Drake Magruder for $1,200 US. I pulled it. I had pictures. And went, wow, this is really cool. And then I got an offer, and I'm like, whoa, you can have it. Have fun. And what did that money do? Just went right back in. Got more. That's what we do. So,
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I'm not really married to the grading. I've bought so many graded cards over the years. But I collect mostly, especially nowadays, I collect mostly just stuff that is rare. So I know there's that whole manufactured scarcity debate with all the vintage and modern stuff. But if a card is 1 of 1, if a card is out of 5, out of 10, and I want it, I'm getting it. So to me, the grade does not matter at all. Hey, if I can buy PSA 10 and it's cheap, sure. If I could buy PSA 8 for half the price of a PSA 10, hey,
you
even
tend
better.
to buy you tend to buy your stuff graded already. You don't take your cards and then send them out after the fact to grade.
I've sent a couple cards. I've never physically, like, from my house sent cards through my mailbox. I have through ComC when they've done, actually now they're with PSA again, so I've submitted a couple cards there. But from my home, I have not, because I wasn't really too interested in it before COVID, and then obviously during COVID it got really expensive to grade your cards, and then now everything's kind of back to normal. So I might send in actually at the expo in November, I might send in a couple cards through PSA Canada, but that's more for kind of what David said, to authenticate and kind of just preserve a couple cards that I have at home, and it's cards that I've had for years, and I just want to have them encased. And if the grading's cheap, I'll do it. But in terms of buying, if I want the card, I'll buy it. If it's raw, if it's graded a 6, a 7, an 8, it doesn't make a difference to me. As long as, because a lot of people, they grade 101s, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with that. You spend your money, you do whatever you want. I'm not going to say anything about it, but some people, if they don't get a 10, they sell it, right? Some people don't get a 9, they sell it. And hey, I'll be a buyer. I'll buy it every time. If it's a card I want, I'll buy it.
Right. Okay, guys, before we wrap up, Tony and I normally do a little sort of, our last section is a story from the field. And I thought, since we're all Canadian guys here, I'll ask you both before we sign off for one sort of wrestling card story that comes to mind. I'll give you mine, and it's more so just, again, being a longtime collector up here in Toronto, but I have very specific memories of going to the post office in the early days and getting money orders to send down to the States, and like getting 5 of them at a time. This was before PayPal, right? When eBay just started. So you could buy the card through eBay, but you couldn't pay. So for me, I'd go, I'd stand in line, and I'd get like 7 different money orders and then send them down to the States. And then the cards came up, and I thought to back then, I didn't know what wrestling cards was going to mean to me later in life and how big the collection was going to get. But I think about that now and I laugh. Shit, I used to stand in line at the post office to get these things just to get cards up here, again, just sort of highlighting the difference being north of the border. And again, I can drive 2 streets over and I can see America. It's just one of those things that come to mind. What about you guys, David?
I think for me, it was, I used to really like when I'd go to card shows and you could just, you felt like you felt like it was still, I don't want to say it was like like an outlaw cowboy kind of thing, but you used to go to card shows and it wasn't mainstream. You know what I mean? Like it was, as this hobby has exploded since 2015, and then when all the new money started coming into it and COVID and things like that, it's just I look back now when I was 2010, 2009, and we look back at all those things, and you used to look at the prices and you think, there's absolutely no way I'm paying X for this because it's not worth it, right? But then you see all the money come in, and then you see all the new people come in, you see the new card bros come in, and everybody has, and I did it too when I returned in 2008. I had questions, and I had, why is it this way? Why is it that way? And you see people come now and think, oh, they should do this. And you get that because you're now the seasoned collector again. You're like, yes, this same argument's been going on since 2010. So just get in line, enjoy it. And, in 10 years, you're going to sit back and listen to the new person as they complain about the exact same thing you complained about 10 years ago. It's like, ever since I stopped really caring a lot about the minutia of the business and just I got back to enjoying my cards. I got back to enjoying collecting. I got back to enjoying the people. I got back to like I spent 2 days at the National where I didn't look at a card. I was hanging out with friends. I was meeting people. I was checking things out, and really, really, cards becoming secondary has been such a great release of, like just the tension of being a collector. And I made the comment a few days ago that, like, if all the garbage, the peripheral garbage going on in this hobby bothers you, it must really be exhausting to be a collector nowadays. Because until you let that go, just collect what you want to collect, enjoy the noise, watch it, have fun with it, see it as like entertainment, but don't let it crush you, don't let it bog you down, don't let it ruin why you're a collector. You collected for a reason. I buy cards now for myself when I was 10, because when I couldn't afford those cards, when you used to look at those cards in the jewel case, right? And you'd fog up the jewel case looking at those cards going, oh man, I'd love to have that card. Now I collect for that portion of myself. I collect for that kid because now I can do that. And so now I can say, you know what? You fogged the glass looking at this card. This is now in your possession. This is in your collection. You're curating this for somebody else. And then when I'm gone, this collection's my wife's problem. It's not mine. So she can do with it as she pleases, piece it out. But right now I'm curating this for, I don't know who, but I'm curating it for somebody.
Very wise words. Pat, what do you got for us?
I like the way you ended that, David. That's perfect. That's what mine is. I'm a big dude. I can't get life insurance, so what I buy, my good stuff goes away, and eventually, hopefully, they build. And when I'm gone, there'll be something there, right? Realistically, for me, one of not my favorite stories, but I love to rip stuff. That's my biggest problem. It's that addiction of ripping and seeing what you can pull. And I pulled, like, this was one of my latest pulls, and of 5 Andre the Giant mezzanine.
Nice.
Like,
Nice.
I didn't even know what it was at first. It was the first box of Select I bought for this year, and I just had it set aside. I thought it was one of the green parallels, right? And then I opened it. I'm like, oh my god, that's incredible. But I bought a box of the 2018 Legends a couple of years ago. I paid like $400 for it, and I was super happy. I cracked it open because I wanted to open it, and I pulled an of 10 Bret Hart auto. The rest of the cards were not that great, so I was like, okay, well, that's it. Now the boxes sell for, like, if you can find them, 2,500 plus, and I'm like, man, I got to get over that addiction of ripping things and maybe try to put some. If I collect as insurance, I should be putting boxes away, but I have a hard time to keep them.
Yeah, but you love it.
And they take up a lot of room too.
They do.
Yeah, they do.
Boxes, and like I have got 3 shelves of unopened wax, and I've already culled it once because it just takes up a lot of room. And you look at it and you're like, yeah, I get what my thought process was at the time, but it's like, man, that takes up a lot of real estate. I could fit 20 binders in there.
Yeah.
That's why I switched to wrestling cards, because my room is covered in figures, mint on card figures, and there's not enough room for them. I stopped buying figures. I don't know. I can get way more cards in a space that a figure holds. So yeah, that was my main.
Real estate is huge when you're a collector.
Absolutely.
You're not alone there, Pat. I mean, Jamie Wallace, Chuck, these are all guys that had figures, and Chuck sold them lock, stock, and barrel, like an incredible amount, just because of space. He just didn't have space anymore, and I get that, Alex, you got a story for us before we sign off?
I kind of blew my load there with the Bulldog story. That's my big story. But yeah, I kind of take bits and parts of what these guys have said. Like David saying, hey, with all the, there's a lot of noise on especially wrestling Twitter and wrestling. But honestly, yeah, like exactly what he said. It must be exhausting if you're a person who gets so, like, you log into Twitter and you're just ready to I don't know, some people, I think they're just ready to fight, or they're just so immersed in every single facet of the hobby. And
you guys know that I'm in the middle of it quite often, and
oh yeah,
I've tried, I've tried to be the Canadian, the nice guy, because very much to what David said. I mean, we do this because we love it. So why would we get into a hobby where we're going to be nasty to people or be upset by what other people say? But it goes beyond wrestling cards on the internet, doesn't it? Some people just really enjoy going online and letting loose, and I can say this honestly, there's guys I know that are the nicest guys in the world, and then I see what they do on Twitter and I'm just shaking my head. It's like, why are you saying that? Why are you getting sucked into this? Why are you posting that? That's not you, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
we've had these talks over and over about the tribalism and the divisions, and it's not Western or vintage and modern. It's just a handful of guys, and I know them all, and I'm friendly with them all, that don't get along for whatever reason. And I've tried my best to try. I said to 2 of them, and we're gonna have them on here. I'd love to get the 4 of you guys in a room and plow you with like some cheap scotch and weed, and I'd get you guys all straightened out in no time. But anyways, guys, we could talk forever. I wanted to thank you all. This was a thrill for me, the first time ever, I think, in any of these shows, not just Tony's network, but I don't think Zan or Card Foundation or anyone else has ever done anything where it's just been 4 Canadian guys. So I'm pleased that that's now in the record. So on YouTube now, when people type in Canadian collectors, we're going to be there. Alex, why don't you tell everybody where people can find you, your Twitter and your Facebook and all that?
So I'm the same username everywhere. It's an awful username I made in 2006 when I started going online when I was like 15, 14. I am Joe Sakic, like the hockey player, Joe Sakic 19XX. It's very embarrassing, but that's my username everywhere. eBay, Instagram, Twitter, every forum you could think of in the world. That's me. Yeah.
Nice. Big Pat.
Mine are all different. My Twitter, unfortunately, I started my Twitter account when I was the social media manager for an adult entertainment company. So you can find me on Twitter at BB Stiffington, because my nom de plume was Bam Bam Stiffington because I wrote reviews for pornos. To be quite honest.
That's a great story.
On Instagram, the one and only Big Pat Ryan, and then on Facebook, Pat Ryan, Big Pat Ryan. You can find me. Type in Big Pat Ryan, it kind of pops up every here and there for many reasons.
David?
And mine's super easy. You can find me everywhere. The name is the same, Long Fly Ball. I have I have my blog sitting out there in the ether, much like everybody did back in 2008, 2009. I keep meaning to go back to it, but I doubt I ever will. But yes, the Facebook, the Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, hit me up at Long Fly Ball. I'm happy to talk. I'm not very serious on there, so don't take anything personally. But it's I have fun with the people I know, with the collectors I know. Yeah, if I'm in a mood, I'll poke a bear once or twice, but other than that, it's really just good times, lots of sarcasm. Don't take anything seriously.
Good words to live by. My name is Paul Anand. I'm with Tony Vela, part of the WTC network. We also run the Wrestling Card Price Guide. Guys, thank you so much for coming. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be back at you soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, guys.
See you, everybody.